Welcome to the Captain's Table. I'm Captain Sham, and I want to help you improvise better Star Trek role-playing games. I personally don't run very rules-heavy games. To me, role-playing is all about sharing stories. And these are not preset stories, they're stories that emerge and grow spontaneously from the whole group's mutual interaction. For this reason, I think a good GM should be as skilled as possible at creative but sensible improvisation. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, I would say consider the plot not as what will definitely happen, but rather as what could potentially happen, and also what has already happened in the past. Okay? A good structure for helping that along is to consider the game as a skeleton. The GM's idea of what the possibilities are is a naked skeleton of just loose bones joined together, right? And perhaps not even joined together, right? They may be rearranged differently into a whole new creature as the players play along, right? And this is then done by allowing the players to add flesh to these bones, right? Their actions are the flesh, the muscles, the blood and veins that fill up the body and hold the skeleton together. Right? So the GM should have core facts to begin with, which are the bones, but then allow the players to rearrange those bones to put them into the order that suits them. Obviously, there has to be some logic to how they're connected, but it's more important that the players flesh it out themselves than that the GM arrives with a full living creature. Right? And then third consideration is that you put a skin of absolute limits around all of this. These absolute limits are things like the rules of the game, or the simple laws of physics, or the usual limitations of the genre that you're working in. Right? You don't want the players to go absolutely off the rails and completely crazy. You need some limitations to things, and that's the skin around the outside. Right? So the GM is arriving with a pile of loose bones contained in a bag of skin, and it's up to the players to inflate that and fill it out and create this creature, right? Mutually, as a group, right? It's not one person's creature, everybody's doing it together. Right? That's how I like to think about the whole process. Of course, it depends exactly what type of game you're running. I often like to run a nice open-ended sandbox type of game, and in that case, I like to think of the GM as the terrain. Okay? The GM is not a specific treasure map saying you must go from A to B. The GM is not specific roads that must be followed. The GM is just terrain. Okay? And whether that's road terrain or wilderness terrain or stars or weird magical locations that don't make any sense, that's the GM, right? The GM is what is there. What happens there, that's then up to the players. Okay? Similarly, if you're running official published adventures that have a more structured approach, those you can approach in a similar sort of way if you consider them as serving suggestions rather than a definite idea of what the game must be. I think it's important to remember that the authors of role-playing adventure books don't know you, and they don't know your group. You need to tell them what it is that suits you best. Right? And they're just giving you ideas. They're telling you, in my imagination, this is how things are probably going to go. But that doesn't mean it has to go that way. So look at your own group, look at your own interests, decide what it is that you want your game to be like, and only take the published adventure as an idea, a serving suggestion. Right? Then the other main consideration that you need for improv is your own players, right, and how experienced they are. If they are very experienced players, they don't need much. You give them a couple initial clues, and they'll go running off on their own to plots that you never even imagined, right? That's nice and easy. The less experienced your players are, the more guidance the GM needs to give them. I'm not saying tell them what to do, right? Remember, you are still just the terrain, not the director. But I think it is important for inexperienced players to give them hints, give them nudges, give them some indication that you could do this, you could do that. Right? And as they get more experienced, they won't need that so much. So pull back on it as you go along. And it's a learning experience for both the GM and the players, but it's worthwhile. Right? And I think all of those considerations together, with practice, leads to a good improvised role-playing game. It doesn't come out of nowhere. You're not going to get it right the first attempt, not even the second or third attempt, but with practice, you just keep going and eventually you get there. Right? And the most important thing out of all of this is make sure it's fun. Okay? If you don't want to do something because nobody in the game would want it, why do it? Okay? If you want to include something because it's going to make it more fun, throw it in. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's officially published or if it's an idea that you previously had, or if it's just come up in the spur of the moment. If it sounds like fun, it's probably worth including.